Three. All right. Hello and welcome to another episode of What Muslims Look Like. My name is Shifa Ahsan.
And my name is Ayan Zubair. This podcast is intended for showing the depth and breadth of the Muslims in society, and from media to medicine and everything in between. We hope you'll find that there's more to us than meets the eye. That was a terrible job, but we're gonna go with that.
All right. Today we have a special guest, my friend and recent Temple University graduate, and now the assistant for player personnel for the NFL, Ameena Soliman. Thanks for being our second guest on this podcast, Ameena.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
So, like you said, I graduated from Temple in May, and right after I graduated, I took a job. So I actually spent my undergrad years working for the Temple football program. I worked as a student worker, kind of went in and out, did a couple hours every week, just got experience, got to know people. And right as I graduated, I took a position as a graduate assistant. So I worked in operations and recruiting. Operations is literally anything you can think of that involves running the program besides the actual football part. It was a lot of hours, kind of just one of those things where you grind it out. We went in season. I think I probably worked 120 hours a week. Wow. But I got a ton of experience. Loved it.
Is that even legal?
But I mean, I got a lot of experience, and it was a good introduction to kind of the sports world. My summer after my junior year, so going into senior year, I'd taken an internship with the NFL. It was a summer internship in player personnel, which is the department that I'm in now. And they actually called me this season, in the middle of the season, and told me a spot was opening up and asked me if I wanted to come back. So it's kind of back and forth because I love Temple and all the experience I've gotten there and all the people, but it was kind of hard to pass up an opportunity like that. So I took it, waited till the end of the season, and I started a couple weeks ago.
Wow. Okay, so obviously you're doing some really, really cool stuff, and we were talking before, and I just want to say it again because I think I'm kind of funny. I was actually going to play in the NFL before I realized I was like this, and then I ended up not doing that. But, you know, if you could, Ameena, walk us through your upbringing, you know what I'm saying, like where you're from, that whole 9 yards of, you know, what made you kind of, you know, pursue the passions you have today?
So I actually went to Islamic school my whole life from pre-K through graduation, and it was pretty cool. I met some friends that I'll probably have for the rest of my life. Met a lot of good people, obviously being raised in an environment kind of where you're around Islam all the time. And I know it's different coming to college, a big school, especially coming from a really tiny school. I graduated with 12 kids in my graduating class in high school. And coming to Temple where I think we had like 6,000, 7,000, it was a ton.
Yeah.
So just coming from that type of environment to this type of environment was kind of, I think a lot of people kind of have this belief, but I think being in an Islamic school is almost kind of puts you in a bubble because you're around people that are like you all the time and you're learning about people that are like you. And there's nothing wrong with that, but kind of gave me perspective going to Temple. So I grew up in Bucks County, which is like a suburb of Philadelphia. And then I moved here after graduation to the city of Philadelphia. Grew up with like most of my family around me in Jersey, Pennsylvania, some down in Florida. But kind of moving from the Islamic school perspective to a huge college perspective was a big change for me. And I think for me, one of the things, so we were in 11th grade and took a career planning class. Mm-hmm. And as you guys can probably imagine, there's a lot of emphasis on like medicine, engineering,
become a doctor. Become a doctor. Do it now, please.
Yeah, which is great. I mean, it drives people to cool directions, and people are successful, and that's awesome. But I think Muslims in general sometimes have a tough time pushing people in other directions, like non-traditional career paths, which everybody else is doing. I think that was probably my biggest shock going from a Muslim school to college. I was like, oh wait, you can do stuff besides medicine and
right.
Yeah, that's crazy. But it was cool. So I actually took the career planning class, and my teacher, I don't know if you know Miss Susie Ismail. She speaks and does.
Oh yeah.
So she's my teacher in career planning. And we had gone around the class one day and said like it was one of the last days of class, and she was like, all right, so like based on everything learned this semester, like what do you think you want to do? And I was like, I don't. So we like went around the room, and I was like, I think I want to be like a sports medicine, something in sports medicine. And she looked at me and she was like, I can't see you doing medicine. She's like, have you ever seen Jerry Maguire? It's a movie about a sports agent. And I was like, no. She was like, you should watch it. She was like, I don't know if you'd be exactly like him, but I could see you doing that, like something different. And it was really at that point, and I was like, wait, I could do something in sports that's not sports medicine. And that was kind of the moment where it like clicked, and I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do. And even when I came to college, I was a little hesitant at first in terms of like decision making and stuff. But that, I think it was really that point. It was like the end of 11th grade that I was like, this medicine is not for me.
Did you have a passion for football before that moment, or was it just like something that you fell into as you came to Temple?
So, I mean, I always liked football as a kid. Like me and some of my cousins would watch like Eagles games growing up. I had a whole bunch of Eagles jerseys. I'm not entirely sure where it started, and people ask me that a lot about like, how did you start watching football? Because my direct family, nobody's really into it. But I remember it was when Donovan McNabb was huge in Philadelphia, and it was awesome. We were like all buying McNabb jerseys, and that's kind of like when it all picked up. And when I got to Temple, I knew I wanted to do something in sports. I didn't know what. So I emailed the then director of football operations. And I was like, hey, I'm a freshman. I want to get involved. What can I do? And he brought me in for an interview. And I started the next day. So I spent my whole undergrad doing that. And just experience-wise, it was awesome.
So can I ask you a question? Obviously you wear hijab, right? And so like what I've always said is that for myself that, yeah, I am Muslim, but like by looking at me, you can't really tell that I'm Muslim, right? Like I could be, but like for you and for Shifa, it's like, like you can't really mistake it. And sports, and especially contact sports, are known to be kind of not the most inclusive environments. And this is generalization, but that's kind of what it is, right? The stereotype. How is that experience of being not only a woman, but a Muslim woman who dons a hijab in a predominantly male-oriented environment?
Yeah, so when I was working at Temple football as a graduate assistant, I was one of 2 people in the entire building of staff that was working full-time, like as a female there. So it's different for sure. I think for a lot of people, I'm probably the first, whether it's coaches or players, I'm probably the first hijabi they've like run into and interacted with on a daily basis, which is cool for me because Shifa knows I've talked to her about this before, but just like being able to interact with people like on a regular level, like you do regular things, or not like talking to them about your religion or anything, but you're just conducting yourself as like a regular, good, like nice human being. And like at the end of the day, if they've met you and let's say they go home and watch the news and their parents are like, oh, look at those terrorists, like they can be like, no, like I know a Muslim, like she's cool, like she's normal, like in there, if you can I think it's a lot more valuable to be able to make an impression on people about what you do rather than like what you're actually telling them. And I've just found like being able to interact with people I'd like to think has opened their minds a little bit, at least to being like, oh, like I know a Muslim female, like a hijabi, and she's doing what she wants to do and doing a good job at whatever she's doing. And it's kind of cool to me.
And I think you hit you're exactly correct with the whole point of dawah, right? We always hear the word dawah, right? And like, we imagine some guy knocking on our door saying, come to Allah or else, Jahannam will await you, right? But really, the best form of da'wah that I've, seen people who, people like you or other people out there are, the Ibtihaj Muhammads of the world, right? Where it's like, she doesn't like actively go out promoting Islam and knocking on people's doors. But think about how many people are like, hey, that's pretty cool. You got a hijabi, woman who won an Olympic prize or Olympic medal. So, I definitely applaud you for that. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, thanks.
Ameena, when you're, sorry.
Yeah. No, go ahead.
When you're like on the field or just like talking to people in your work, like you said, you were the only one of the only 2 women. So like knowing that you're the only Muslim that they're talking to, do you ever feel this sort of like pressure to act a certain way or to watch what you're saying or just like things of that sort, or is it just
So that was actually what exactly I was going to say. So I know like it's not necessary, but sometimes I think I'm not the only one that feels this way. You feel kind of a need to not even necessarily do anything different, but that you have to like conduct yourself.
Overcompensate, definitely, right?
Yeah, overcompensate might be, I would think that's probably the closest word, but kind of that you feel like you have to do like an extra good job and be extra nice, because if you do something like mean or whatever that maybe any other person would do, like it looks worse. And like whether you want to or not, like as a hijabi, like you are representing, like you like it's not necessary. You have to be like, oh, like Shifa wearing a hijab like represents all Muslims, but in people's heads, if you're the only Muslim they know and like you did something, like that's in their heads as like things that Muslims do. So like it's not necessarily a negative thing, because if it's driving you to do like a better job at what you're doing or like be a better role model or whatever, like I don't think that's negative. The idea where it comes from, that it's essentially like stereotyping, and it could happen in a positive way. That like if somebody has a good thought about you, that it's more likely that they'll have good thoughts about like your group of people or anything like that. I do sometimes feel like that. But I know some people think it's negative because of the stereotype thing, but I don't think it's necessarily a negative thing.
And that's why I think that representation is so important, especially in like one in government and also in media, right? Because frankly, to be honest with you, I've always found it unfair that minorities have to kind of work twice as hard to get half as much, right?
Yep.
That's what we've always been told. And God forbid if someone cuts me off on the road, if I even get a little bit angry because what I'm saying, they're gonna be like, oh, those damn Muslim, what I'm saying, whatever.
Yep.
And especially when you're noticeably or like I guess identifiably Muslim, there is an added fear of what I'm saying, like the physical your physical well-being is also in question. So I guess my question for you is, as sports like NFL or like something like the WNBA, right, where there's women obviously playing.
Right.
Where do you see Muslims kind of filling in that space in the next, decade, 2 decades, 3 decades?
Just in like the sports industry in general?
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, especially Muslims and especially Muslim women.
Yeah, in all honesty, like I was talking to someone and I was like, I don't know if I know another Muslim female hijabi that like actively wants to work in sports.
Very true.
Like Temple has an undergrad program for sports management. I didn't do it, but I know all the people, and I actually did finance and marketing for undergrad. But like I didn't know any Muslim people in the program, and like definitely not any Muslim females. And then I'm in a master's program for sports management. Don't know any Muslims in the program either. Definitely not any Muslim females. I mean, I guess maybe it's kind of like an upbringing thing. Like not a lot of Muslim females are like into sports growing up, and like that's not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, I know some Muslim males that are kind of trying to push into that direction who like want to work for the NBA or college sports or whatever it is. And there's people that are doing it. So the director of basketball operations for the Temple basketball team is actually Muslim.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah. And there's people that are in that space, I think. But a lot of times when it's guys, like you were saying earlier, aren't necessarily identifiable by like either their name or like what they look like. So it's not as, I guess, not as prominent. But in terms of Muslim females, like I think there's definitely space to do that. And like I like to think that like if I do it, then maybe there's like one little kid who's like, oh wait, like this is maybe a potential career path. Like that would be kind of cool. But in all honesty, like I don't personally know any people that are like actively trying to work in sports, but like there's definitely space for it. And is it harder because you're a female? Yeah. Is it harder because you're a Muslim female? Definitely. But there's definitely room for growth in that area. And if I could be of like any part of expanding it in any way, like I would love to do something like that.
Do you think there aren't as many females or Muslim hijabis wanting to do that just because of the lack of representation in that? Or do you feel like it's just not something that females sort of like this? I'm generalizing, but like females growing up aren't pushed to like go into sports or like, just the way you were.
I mean, I would think from what I've experienced, there's a decent number of females that are looking to work in sports, either like from a study perspective or like from an industry perspective that like want to do it. I don't know if it's because maybe it's stigmatized as like a male industry more like from a Muslim community perspective. That like I've never seen anybody say like Muslim women shouldn't work in sports. It's just something that I don't really think is on people's radars because like a lot of times, like we said before, there's like a lot of pressure to go in certain career directions, and I don't think this is anywhere close to one of them.
No, not at all.
I mean, there are people like they're pushing representation in other ones, whether it's like politics or like media. Sometimes I've seen it like where it's like growing, and there's definitely not enough people in it, and you need more. But I would think sports is just not one of those ones that's really on people's radars. I don't really think it's like anything against it, but I don't think there's anything really for it either.
Well, I think what's cool, and the very reason why Shifa and I made this podcast was supposed to highlight people doing things that conventionally or stereotypically or whatever are in Muslim fields, whatever that means. And what's cool is you're saying about inspiring someone else. Who knows who's gonna watch this? You know what I mean? Besides my mom and Shifa's mom, right? But
and now your mom.
Yeah, and your mom too, right? But the cool thing would be some little girl somewhere looking and be like, hey, I like sports, but I was always told I can't do it, or it's a man's world, or whatever the case may be. And what I always say is that and let me know if you agree with this. And it's fine if you don't, but there is massive inequality, and there is massive discrepancies in racism in Islam. All these things exist, right? But I think we live in an unprecedented time today where like we have so many opportunities, and there's so many good people out there. You know, it's not like everyone is walking around, you know, with a vendetta against Muslim people.
Yep.
So I think it's definitely doable. Is it hard? I mean, of course it is, right? But I think it's definitely doable. And, you know, whatever we put our mind to, I think we can do it.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that too. That like, I think a lot of people have the idea that people are like out to get us, and I don't think that's necessarily true. Like, are there bad people out there? Sure, but I think more than anything, there's people that just don't know one way or the other. Like, they either see what they see on the news or just have no idea because they've never met a Muslim before. And like when you have people like you and Shifa and me, like whoever, just interacting with people, just normal interactions with people, I think it has the potential for like a positive stereotype type effect where they think you're a cool person and think that other Muslims must be cool people too, and kind of just opens doors from there. I think networking wise too, it's important for like Muslims to help other Muslims networking wise. And I know the school that we went to has tried for like an alumni network and stuff like that, to kind of connect people who are working in whatever fields to younger people that kind of want to do that type of thing. And I think that's important also. I mean, networking in general is important, but networking with other Muslims who've kind of like done that same path or gone through stuff in the same industry is helpful because you have more of like a similar experience.
Speaking on the topic of like networking and like with Muslims and stuff, you said you grew up in an Islamic environment, and I like in the same way, like I went from preschool to 12th grade in the same Islamic school, right? So this is not something that most people do, obviously, right? Like being in football, hijabi, like that's not known. So like, how is the response from your community knowing that like you're in that, like you're literally working in the NFL and like you've been working in football? So like, was that something that they received well, or is there any like, you know,
so
response?
In high school, like I said, I was thinking about sports medicine, and a lot of people, so like going through high school, like it was a real small school and community, and people were like, oh yeah, like medicine, like good job, sports medicine, cool, like it's still medicine. And at that point, so it was really like senior year when I was applying for college, and like all I knew is I wasn't doing medicine. So I was applying either like undecided, business, liberal arts. And some of my teachers were like, oh, like not medicine. And people in the community were like, oh, like, didn't you want to go into medicine? And I was like, I thought I did. I just like, it's not my thing. Like I can't. And I was like, I realized that every time I said sports medicine out loud, the only part I liked about that was
sports, not the medicine.
And I was like, and I started like, it was really that year that I started exploring like different options. Like, oh, you can be like a sports agent or work in sports or like whatever the situation is. And initially I think it was like weird to people. So I would say it. And I remember going back to visit my school and see some of my teachers and stuff. They're like, oh, so like, what are you doing? And I told one of them, I was like interning for USA Football, which is kind of like a youth organization. I had done that a couple of years back. And they were like, one of my teachers was like, oh, okay.
My goodness.
Like, I don't think like she had any, it wasn't even like negative on purpose, but it was just like weird. And initially, like it definitely, people would be like, oh, I would see somebody I hadn't seen in 2 years and they're like, oh, you're doing pre-med, right? And I was like, no. And they're like, oh, sorry to hear that. Like I lost a family member or something. And I was like, I mean, it's cool. Like I didn't want to do medicine. I think people did have expectations kind of because I set them and I thought I was going to. So like I'd catch up with people and they're like, oh, like, didn't you want to do medicine? So in the beginning it was like weird. I don't think people like when I would say like sports business, they were like, huh? After I graduated though and like started working and with this NFL thing, honestly, I've gotten more of a positive response like as I went later on. I think when I was in undergrad, people were kind of confused about like what I wanted to do and what I was doing. But they're like, oh wait, she finished college. Oh wait, she can get a job after college. Something's working out somewhere. So, I mean, obviously I'm still on the path to trying to figure things out and what I want to do long term. But it's definitely been more positive as I've like kind of moved along the process from like graduating high school until now.
I think that's
Still have like aunties that are like, what?
Yeah.
Like sports, like,
Right. It's just uncharted territory, I feel like, right?
Yeah.
Like,
I think it's just different. People don't like hear it all the time or ever. So it's kind of just something for them to get used to.
Yep.
It's a weird concept, I think, for like our parents. And I mean, did your parents immigrate to America or were they?
So yeah, so my dad grew up in Egypt until he was like 5 and came back here. So he pretty much grew up in the United States, and my mom was born here. So I guess I kind of have the advantage of like having parents who like grew up in America, like in the U.S. and kind of know like the landscape better, like the cultural landscape and stuff. And I can imagine that people with parents who are like first generation probably have it a little bit more difficult.
Well, because what I was going to say was that, you know, we have to also put ourselves in perspective of our parents, right? Where like, you know, when our parents came to America, it wasn't about doing what you liked, it's about doing what was available, right? And it's such like a new concept to think, hey, you can actually do what you want to do in life and make a living, right? And I think what you were alluding to is the fact is that, you know, no one really believes in you until you show them reason to believe in you, right? You know, like Shifa and filmmaking, right? Like Shifa and I are actually cousins, so it's like, oh, Shifa's filmmaking. Like, what is filmmaking, right? But then you see her work, and it's like, oh, okay, so she's actually like wow, yeah, that's good. And you start building a following through there, you know. And it's unfortunate, but you know, someone's got to do it, right? Someone's got to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I mean, at the end of the day, like Shifa's working in an industry that like not a lot of Muslim people work in, and like it's probably going to be more difficult for her than it will be for like people going forward. So like at the end, like you need people, and like I hope I'm doing a similar thing in sports, where like you doing what you're doing now is going to make it easier potentially for people that want to go the path going forward.
A trailblazer, 100%.
Yeah. So the NFL, Ameena, is a huge deal. For your first time in the summer when you interned there, like your first day going there, can you like just walk us through that? Like what did you feel that time? What was going through your head?
So first day of my internship was the first day of Ramadan that year. I was really tired because I woke up for suhoor and couldn't go back to sleep. So I remember being like super exhausted, and I was like, I didn't drink enough water, should have ate more. And so a girl walked in and she looked at me and she was like, "Are you fasting today?" And I was like, another like intern who was there for the summer, and I was like, "Yeah." And I was like, "Are you fasting?" And she was like, "Yeah, like I'm
squad."
Yes. That was kind of a cool way to start. I mean, I really didn't know what to expect because I hadn't known anybody that had like interned there or anything. And even the description that I had for my own department, I still didn't know what I was doing. So it's player personnel. I was like, and they tried to tell me stuff, and I was like, yeah, like that sounds cool, but like I really had no idea what I was going to be doing. It was kind of overwhelming. I mean, it's a real big building, and the NFL has, I think, 4 floors of the building. It's a big office. There were like 40 interns, and they had told us there. So we had a training the first day, and they told us that there were, I think, 2,000 kids that applied, and they picked like 40 of us for like between different departments. Wow. So like that was cool. And like the kids were all from like Ivy League schools, like really high academic schools, like had a lot of like experience. Somebody's fun fact, they'd been to every Super Bowl game that they've been alive for. And I was like, my fun fact is I'd never been to an NFL game. I'm working here and I've never been to one. But I mean, it was cool just getting to like see, especially for me, because growing up in the Islamic community, there weren't people interested in doing like working in sports. College was a little different because I met people with more similar like career goals and that type of thing. But it was pretty cool to kind of just get to know other people that are on the same path, and like we made the same cut to getting there. It was overwhelming, but it was awesome.
So, if I can segue back to your, Islamic school education days, right?
Yeah.
I'm from Long Island, and there's some Islamic schools here, and I know many people that went to Islamic school, and some of them had really great experiences there, and some of them, frankly, didn't. Right.
Yeah.
Especially the girls there, they've said that there's, a double standard or, whatever the case may be, which is, of course, very unfortunate, right? I mean, you want to go to Islamic school to get an Islamic education, and if, you're treating one gender differently than another, that's inherently un-Islamic right there. What was your experience of Islamic school like? And you had the experience of, going to an very small Islamic school, right? And the experience of going to, Temple in Philly, which is a huge school. So, not which is better, which is what, but can you run us through that dynamic and that kind of how that worked for you?
And so it's definitely different. So Islamic school, I think one of the things that a lot of schools struggle with is kind of the balance between the academic part and like the Islamic part. And I've heard of Islamic schools where like you come out and like you memorize half the Quran and like all the stuff, which is awesome, but like the academic part's horrible, and kids were like not getting into like 4-year schools and stuff like that because there wasn't as much of an emphasis on like the regular academic part. And I think the school that I went to, which is Norley Mountain in Jersey, did a pretty good job of that balance. So we're definitely one of like the top academic Islamic schools like in New Jersey and probably in the country. So there was an emphasis on that. And obviously learning the Islamic stuff in the classroom is important, but like I think the most important thing for me was just being able to like be around Muslims and like the friends that I made too, because those are like the people that I like grew up with, and like my parents are friends with their parents and that type of thing. And like those are the people that I'm still surrounding myself with now. So just kind of getting like good, like wholesome people that like you can relate to on a ton of levels was great for me. Going into college was just different. Number one, number wise, because Islamic school was so much smaller, but also realizing that like it's good to be in Islamic school and be people around you, but you lose perspective of like how wide like the range of people you're going to meet are. But we did little like interfaith things where like we met with kids from like a Catholic school or whatever, and that was cool. But I don't think you really get to really experience like the full range of like different people from different walks of life and areas and goals and that type of thing until you get to college or whatever your next step is. So I think that was the biggest like change for me, just kind of size wise, and then realizing that there's a lot of different perspectives that you don't necessarily get going to Islamic school.
Sure. I guess, one question I had for you, and like I'm trying to figure out how to phrase this, in the best way possible is, it's kind of probably like a dumb question, but like you work in the NFL right now, right? Are you interested solely in football, or like, if, I don't know, I'm throwing this out there, New York Knicks come calling and they want, you see what I'm saying? Like,
no, it's not a dumb question. So I just like, as a sport, I like football more. And for me, just my personal experiences have mostly been football. So I worked for Temple. I did an internship with USA Football and then the NFL. So like for me, just knowledge wise, I know the most about football. So like ideally I'd like to stay in it, but I really haven't had a ton of experience in other sports. But like I would be open to working with like a basketball team or a baseball team. I know people that kind of make the transition. Obviously there'd be a learning curve, but for me, just knowing, like having the background of working in it and like that's a sport I know the most about. So it's kind of just a personal thing. I know there's people that like transition back and forth between different ones. But yeah, it's not something I would be against. Like ideally I'd stay in football, but if a cool opportunity popped up in a different sport, I'd definitely be open to it.
I mean, in the message that you sent me, you said sports have a unique way of bringing people together who otherwise wouldn't be together. Can you like talk to us more about like what you meant by that?
Yeah. So even just like from a fandom perspective, like if you think about like Eagles fans, for example, usually have a reputation of being pretty aggressive and not maybe the nicest people. But I remember like being a kid and going to, I can't remember what it was. It was like an autograph signing for one of the players. And like I was wearing a hijab at the time. It was in high school, I think. And like at the end of the day, like the thing that brings you together, and like Eagles fans definitely have a reputation for not being very like tolerant. And I remember thinking that and I was like, I don't know, like, but like the only thing that people care about when it's like game day or when it's whatever the event is that you have like, you're a fan of the same team. So even from a fan perspective, even from like an industry perspective, but like you see it with like soccer in other countries that like people get into fights and stuff because they're on other teams, but you see people that are so different, that are supporting the same team, and like it can bring people together. Like you're at a Super Bowl party or something and like you're with people that are totally different from you, but at the end of the day, like the reason that you're all together is because you're supporting like X team or Y team. Like for me, I think that's cool because it really has a potential to break down barriers. Like even I think historically, like before sports were like really like integrated and stuff, like, or before like the country and like school systems and stuff, like sports are one of the things that brought people together before even like schools are desegregated and stuff like that. Just because like you're working towards a common goal, and the common goal really has nothing to do with like what your personal beliefs are. Like if it's a football game and everybody on the team is a different background, like you're still going to get together and win the game because you all want to win the game and you have like that same end goal in mind. And I don't think it's exclusively for sports, but I think just because it's intense and people are passionate about them, it has the potential to maybe do that more than other things. But I think that it's kind of like a unique, it kind of gives you like a unique perspective because, I mean, it almost kind of helps me because, or even other Muslims that are in the industry, because like you're different, but like it's the same deal. Like you're all working for the same team or the same league or whatever it is. And like at the end of the day, like you still need to get to that point regardless of how different you are.
So, that we just talked about actually kind of sparked an idea in my head. And I don't know how much can you hear me, by the way?
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know why my mic was being weird. I don't know how much you can like openly talk about this. But there's a lot of controversy around the NFL right now. Right. And, for various different reasons, we all know about them, whether that's, from the protests, whatever the case may be. How has, that kind of played out, behind the scenes in the NFL, and, what if any, kind of effect has your presence been in shaping those discussions, with your coworkers or colleagues?
So I've only been there I've only been back for a little while. Like it's been like 2 weeks since I got back. So like in the time that I've been there, it really hasn't come up. People who like knew I was getting a job had like asked me like, oh, like have they talked about it? Like what's going on? And to be honest, like it hasn't come up yet. I'd be curious for it too. And like more than anything, it'd probably come up in like a lunch discussion with coworkers rather than like an official meeting where like you sit down and discuss something like that. I would also think it's probably like obviously the league itself has like a stance one way or the other, but I think it's probably more of a significant issue with the teams just because like that's something that they're deciding, like, are we going to do this on the sideline? Are we going to whatever the situation is? It probably affects them more in terms of like unity and brotherhood and that type of thing on like a team level, I think, than it does on a league level. But I don't think I have like a good perspective on that just because I haven't been there for long enough.
That's fair.
I know we talked about this like way before in the beginning, but that time that I was taking pictures of you for my other What Muslim Women Look Like project, I just remember like you were just throwing a ball with two of your other coworkers, and then people were walking by and they're like yelling your name and they're like, "Hey, Ameena," blah blah blah, and it was just like really nice, just like for me to look at and just see how like lovable and how like everyone really like was like your friend. Do you ever feel like, I know like we have the hijab on like all the time, and it's for me sometimes I forget that I have it on because like I don't feel like it always has to have an effect. And do you like, how do you feel about that? And especially like where you work?
I feel kind of the same way. Like in the beginning it was definitely something that I was like a little concerned about, like when I was first interviewing as a freshman and like even going out like in games and stuff. So I remember it was this season, we were in Tulsa, Oklahoma. We had an away game and I was on the sideline with some of the players. And one of them was right before the game, and one of them was like, "Hey, don't turn around right now." But like a bunch of people are like staring at you. And then he was like, he's like, they probably never seen a Muslim before. And I was like, yeah. He was like, he's like, don't turn around, like they're behind you, but like there's a bunch of them staring at you. And I was like, oh, it was kind of like weird for me because it's not really something that, like you said, like you almost forget because like I interact on a regular basis. Like it doesn't change the way I interact with them. But kind of, I guess, just going outside and dealing with people that you don't normally deal with maybe makes you realize it a little more. We had a football camp this summer and a coach came up to me. He was like, "Oh, how's it going?" And I was like, "Good." And he was like, "No, like, how's Ramadan going?" Good.
That's so funny.
It's going well. I don't know why you had to whisper, but it's great. But yeah, I think on a daily basis, because I was with the team and I was with them so much and like the staff and stuff, it was never like an issue. Yeah. Kind of when you're interacting with like external parties or like if it was Ramadan and like you have to tell them like you're not eating or whatever the situation was. But yeah, it wasn't like you said, like you're not thinking at everything I do like, oh, I'm doing this because I'm wearing a scarf. Like, it doesn't have to do with it. But I would think like initially and then just dealing with other people.
So for, like for people who are maybe contemplating wearing the hijab or not sure about it because of, for various reasons that other people have, you're working in a field where like it's really like out there, the fact that you are a Muslim, like as opposed to being a doctor, as opposed to being somewhere where like wearing hijab is common. What would you, I know it's like a really lame question to ask, but like what sort of advice do you have maybe from your perspective of just like being in a place where people don't really notice that, like how you deal with it and how you go about it?
I mean, I know everybody has different reasons for doing it or not doing it, but for me, I think I definitely overestimated like how difficult it was going to be to do and interact with people. And like, yeah, it's different and people will stare at you more and have stereotypes about you just based on what you look like. But at the end of the day, at least from what I've experienced, and I can't speak for other industries, but like when you do a good job and whatever you're doing, you're excelling at, it really doesn't matter. Like even in school, like with your professors, like if you're getting a grade and doing a great job in class, like it doesn't change anything. Like you're still doing well. If you're doing a good job, like you're still doing a good job. And like, it's different. So for me, I actually started wearing it in high school and it was so I had a summer job. I was a camp counselor. I wasn't wearing it the one summer and the next summer I was, and I was so scared. So I started wearing it in the middle of the year and I knew I was taking the job again. None of them had seen me like since I started wearing the scarf, and I was freaking out. And I was like, this is gonna be so weird. They're not going to remember me. Like it's strange. Like the kids are going to be weirded out. Cause I worked with like 8 and 9-year-olds. And I remember going to like a meeting with like our coworkers and stuff. And my boss came up to me and like put his hand out and I thought he was going to reintroduce himself to me. And I was like, oh my God. Like, Ameena, great to see you again. And I was like, I was so scared he like wasn't going to recognize me or something. Yeah. And it was the same deal. So I dealt with kids. This is kind of unrelated to sports, but like, in the beginning, the kids were like, what is that? Like, why do you do it? And I'd be like, oh, it's like a religious thing. And some of them would understand and some of them were like, okay, whatever. But like at the end of the day, like they were confused at first and they asked you a question and then they realized that it doesn't matter because you're the same person anyways. And that was it. It was like past the first 2 days. And like, I think you can it's different with adults because I think adults have more like biases and stereotypes in their heads before they meet, whereas kids are kind of more like pure in that sense. But kind of the same idea that like, if you do what you need to do and you're interacting with people the way you're supposed to be interacting with them, like it can throw people off, but the more you interact with people, the more it's like normalized and it doesn't really affect how you're interacting with people.
Wow, that was deep. I'm good with my questions on my end. What about you, Shifa?
This is just one that I personally wanted to ask you, but I guess we could ask you on the podcast, just like from like all your experiences so far, like regarding football, just like your experiences. What's been the most like memorable, if any, like one incident sticks out? Wow, I couldn't speak.
I mean, most of my time I spent with Temple, and the football team. So for me, like, it's not even necessarily like Muslim related, but we were on the field when we beat Penn State for the first time in 75 years, and when we had Notre Dame in College game day. So like that was pretty cool. I'm trying to think if like there's something specific. Like in all honesty, like this season, especially because I was working so many hours, that's when I started post graduation. Like I really got a chance to like know all the players and like the coaches and stuff too, but like on a personal level. And some of them, not like necessarily like, I don't want to use the term racist, but maybe come from backgrounds that like they haven't been exposed to like a hijabi before, or like not really from like really tolerant like cities or like whatever the situation is. And like getting to know kids who are like, oh yeah, Trump's going to be a great president, that like also think I'm a good friend of them. I think like gives, so whether or not like it changed their perspective on Muslims or whatever, like it at least gives them the idea that there's like people out there that are normal and kind of, I don't know. I'm probably not describing this properly.
No, you are. That makes total sense.
But yeah, if that makes sense, just getting like to know them, like whether it's like the players or the coaches, and like they'll ask questions and stuff, and it's cool. And someone be like, oh, like this is probably a dumb question, but, and then I was like, I'd rather you ask me questions, and having them come up and be like, oh, like somebody asked me if I had, one of the players asked me if I was born with it.
Oh my God, I've never heard that one before.
I was like, I don't think anybody's born with any clothing. Like, what?
Oh my God. How did you respond to that?
Yeah, and I asked him, and I was like, were you born with like a shirt on? Like, I was like, no. I was like, I mean, they don't like throw it on you once you're born either. Like, I was like, you kind of do it when you want to do it and when like the timing is right. Like what other fun questions I've gotten. I've gotten asked if I have to shower with it.
Oh, one time someone asked me, they're like, hey, you're Muslim, right? I'm like, yeah, I'm Muslim. And they go, so you know those hijabis? I'm like, yes, I do know them. Goes, so like, how do they take a shower? I'm like, well, how do you take a shower? And they're like, oh, word, okay. I got you.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, like I told them all the time, like I would come up with like random questions. I'd be like, and they'd say like, oh, like, I don't know if I should ask this, but and I was like, you can ask me literally anything. And also like just being available and like open enough for them to want to come up to me and be like, hey, like I have this question about whatever, was really cool to me. That honestly might be like one of my favorite parts. Cause like, it's not like a huge, like memorable experience, but like for them to be comfortable enough to come up and be like, why do you wear that? Like, when did you start wearing it? Whatever the questions are. Like in Ramadan too, it kind of opened doors also because there was a player who was fasting. And they would ask me and ask him. And like, I guess they didn't really realize with him because like you said, no one really knew that he was Muslim until that. And they're like, oh wait, like you too?
So you're one of the Muslims too? No.
But yeah, I think that was like one of the cooler things. And like, just, I'm not with them anymore all the time, the Temple guys, but like, I'm comfortable enough with them that like, they'll text me and be like, hey, like I was doing whatever. And like, had a question on whatever. And I think between the guys and the staff, like I built like a lot of lifelong relationships, that like, even if I don't talk to somebody for 2 years, I'll see them in 2 years at an event and be like, oh my God, like, and you just pick up right where you left off. So that was probably.
So what's your, like, where's that line between like innocent or I guess like, you know, like questions that are like from a good place and questions that are obviously like, I don't want to sound racist, but don't you like eat your parents? You know what I'm saying? Like something like that. You know what I mean?
I'm sure like a lot of people on this on the podcast listening or who are people who aren't Muslim and stuff, and I feel like they have that question, which is totally valid, of asking like I don't know if I should ask my Muslim friend this question or not. So yeah.
No, I would say like I would definitely encourage people. To be honest, I think I've been lucky because like people have asked me like, have you had like racist interaction and stuff? And like aside from people like staring and once in a while asking like weird questions, and these aren't people like within. These are like people like external. If I'm in a game, like a fan or something. But I would think that like pretty much everybody has just been out of like curiosity or like they really genuinely just don't know. But I've been lucky in terms of like not having the negative experiences. But I would say for like any non-Muslim, if you have a Muslim friend and you have any question, like ask them. Like you obviously want to be respectful in going about it, and like you don't want to say something bad, but I think it's better, and people prefer for the most part that you ask questions than assume something that's not true. So yeah, I would say definitely to ask as many questions as possible, because it makes you a better like learner, also being able to interact with like Muslims in the future.
Thanks, Ameena, so much for being on this. I'm so surprised that like you haven't blown up yet. I'm saying yet because inshallah you will. Like,
wait, someone emailed me today. He's from like Temple. He was like, I'm with the alumni magazine. Like, can I interview you? And I was
there
like,
we go. There we go.
That's awesome.
So
I'm just waiting for it because like literally you said like there's no other female, like not even hijabi, but like barely any females, you know, out in the NFL and stuff like this. And you're like a hijabi, so like soon enough inshallah we'll be saying like first hijabi in NFL, blah blah blah. Hello.
Wow.
I'm just rambling.
Someone asked me that, and I was like, I don't know if there's any way to verify that I'm the first hijabi. Like, how far do you go back? Like, are there records like that say there? I don't know.
True, but like I'm 99% sure you are
anybody else, but
right.
I can't like verify.
Well, in my heart, you were the first.
She was number one. You see SpongeBob before?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, thank you so much. It really means a lot that you made the time out.
Thank you guys. I appreciate it.
Your commute is really, really hectic every day, and for you to make a couple hours, an hour out.
I don't think people even heard that.
Yeah,
you mentioned your commute. Everyone needs to listen to what Ameena's commute is right now. Please.
Yeah. So I'm going back and forth from Philly to New York. It's about 2.5 to 3 hours, and I've tried out like 3 different like methods of transportation because it's really long, but there's really no way to cut it. But for now, I drive to South Jersey, and I take a bus from South Jersey to New York. I get a lot of nap time in on the way there and the way back. It's not the worst thing. It could be worse.
And then compared to, please also explain your post-grad.
So as a graduate assistant, for whoever doesn't know what a graduate assistant is, but like when you work for a football program or you're a GA, it's basically like, I want to say it's like your hazing period, but it's not. But it's basically like you determine like, are you going to make it or are you not going to make it? So like you work these ridiculous hours. You're in at like 6 or 7. You leave at like 10 or 11. And then as a GA, you're in class. So you're a graduate assistant. So you're taking master's classes. So like at some point, like you got to figure out, like you got to go to class, you got to do homework and study, but there's so much work to be done that doing homework and studying is the last thing that anybody's concerned about. So in all honesty, like it's really like to kind of weed people out and be like, are you going to survive in college football or not? So we worked crazy hours. So including weekends, there was a period of like, I think a month and a half where we didn't have a day off. And then we got a day off and it was like a half day. So it was kind of like, it's one of those things where like you're all in or you're not. So that was good because I think whatever job I have after that will never, ever be as difficult or time. So I'm good. It's only up from here. Wow. But experience wise, it was awesome just because you're like there all day and you like eat breakfast, lunch and dinner in the building and like with the same people and stuff. So believe it or not, even with the commute, I'm still have more free time than I used to.
It's wild.
Alrighty, well, Ameena, thank you so much. Thank you so much. And
thanks, Ameena.
One last thing, where can people like follow you or follow your journey and see where you end up?
So I have a Twitter and an Instagram. I think I have the same handle for both of them. It's at Meen, MEEN _ Mill, MILL.
Amazing. We'll also post it. I think it is.
Yeah.
At Meen _ Mill.
Free McMill though, really, like that's crazy.
Free Mc, for real.
That's crazy.
Alrighty.
All right.
Take care.
Thanks, you too.